Welcome to our webinar for the adjusted certification process for C-Sinks. My name is Julia Winter and I'm the COO of Carbon Standards International. I'm here with my colleague Patricia Pschera, which is our new product manager for WBC, the World Biochar Certificate Guidelines. As you have read in our newsletter, we have adjusted our certification process for C-Sinks. When selling CO2 credits on the market, our C-Sinks compete with CO2 credits from compensation markets, for example, afforestation. Our market with biochar C-Sinks are still very new, but the sellers of biochar C-Sink require the same transparency and documentation of the C-Sink and projects on which they are used to have for projects on the compensation market. And also the requirements of the accreditation bodies for methodologies are based on the knowledge of this compensation market. We have now implemented a system which suits our biochar market, which is more complex than an afforestation project until the CO2 credits can be issued. And we also meet the requirements of the International Carbon Reduction and Offsetting Accreditation, ICROA, which is a global recognized accreditation system. So we will explain you in the following 60 minutes the process and the documents which are part of this certification process. And in this certification process, as I said, we want to cover this knowledge which is already on the market, but also put it into our biochar market. And this is why we have decided to create this certification system as follows. So you have your production unit where you pyrolyze your biomass in the production unit and then produce biochar. And then in some cases, you process also the biochar, for example, for construction materials or for putting it into compost and then into the soil. So we have here different steps in our process to create a CO2 credit or a carbon sink. And we have in this green area the topics or the subjects which are related to the producer of the biochar, so the main part or who produces the physical product. And then on the right part, these are the processing steps. And so we build up this system so that we have on the first part a project design document where we cover all the requirements for the production of the biochar and roughly for what the biochar can be used for and in which regions. And then we have separate documents for the other actors in the chain, for the processors and applications, where we also have the documentation. I will tell you firstly the certification process roughly, and then we go close into the documents, and then we have also time for questions and also in the meantime, so we make some breaks and ask for questions, and then you can raise your hand and ask your question. So you have seen this certification process already in the newsletter. So we always start with the registration with Carbon Standards International and CSI, and then also for the C-Sink certification. And then we have this project design document and a monitoring plan, which I will explain you later on. And this project design document is based on the eligibility criteria and our approved methodology. So for example, the EBC C-Sink certification. Then we have in the third step the validation of the PDD and the issuance of the validation statement. This is made by CSI, our partner and certification and validation body. And then you have your project implementation and operation in step 4 and your monitoring, which you regularly make. Then you will have a verification once a year by an on-site inspection, and you see there is a circle from the step 6 until step 4. So this is something which is repeated every year. Besides, the other line are only once at the beginning or if there are any changes. And then you issue, or the ceasing certificate will be issued by CSI, and the ceasing will be registered in the registry. So when we now start.
Yeah, I think you muted yourself.
Sorry, thank you very much. So when we start with the first step, the registration, then you know that we at Carbon Standards International have our registration form where you can tick this certification of EBC C-Sync. And on the CSI part, it's an online registration form which calls Cognito form, where you also can click the C-Sync potential service. And when you have clicked these two services with Carbon Standards International and CSI, then this process, which we explain today, is applicable for you. Then on the second step, we are talking about the project design document. So we offer a template which you see on the left-hand side, where the methodology, the EBC C-Sync standard, is covered. So with all the explanation how we create a C-Sync out of biochar. And this document needs to be adapted by you in the red parts of the document. This document is for the producers applicable, and then we have annexes for processors which are also in the supply chain involved. And then on the right hand side, you see the social responsibility checklist from CSI, which is also a document which we need as an annex of the project design document. You see all the documents which are lined with in green. These are documents from Carbon Standards International, and the documents which have a line in blue, these are templates from CSI or documents which CSI issues. And now I hand over to Patricia, and she will explain you the content of the project design document and the annex for processors.
Thank you very much, Julia. I hope you can see my screen now. We are going through the project design document. As Julia said, we defined or we had the challenge to define a project in order to meet the requirements of the market. And we said, okay, we did define the project from the viewpoint of a producer. So the whole production of a producer is what we call a project, and then it goes granularly, it goes becomes more detailed and more detailed, and now that's relevant for our producers here. So that's how the project design document looks like. It has many pages. However, it will be quite straightforward for you to fill in because all the biochar projects follow roughly the same structure. So what we did in order to make you the work as easy as possible is that we filled the document with black parts, with red parts. The red parts in normal letters are always something where it's very easy to understand what you need to fill in. For example, the name of the project should be name of the project, or the date of issuance of this document you can fill in here. And then there's also parts where you have red parts in italics. That's where you have some explanation what you should put there instead of the red italics. So for example, here the project start date, you may ask, oh, what exactly is the project start date? And then you have an explanation behind in italics. So what we'll do now is that I'll show you or guide you through the document and show you where you have to fill in what and what it is about. And whenever you want to change the black parts, that's possible. If you say, oh, that's not really fitting to my project, then please do it in track changes so the changes are easily detectable, because Ceres will expect that most of it, if it's not changed, just stays the default. So that's the cover page, so to say. And that's about the project location, the project start date, and then the project summary, where you just give like really short 2 sentences about what you're doing in this project and some expectation about how much carbon will be sequestered in the project. Then we have a look at the table of content. So the first 3 chapters are about the description of the project. So it's about the purpose and the general description, including project boundary, baseline scenario, eligibility and additionality, and some, these are the general parts that are covered by chapter 1. Then we have second chapter, which goes to the ex-ante estimate of the impact of the project. So how much these things could be created in the best case with the project. And then third goes more in detail to the technology and the company itself. And then we have the fourth chapter, where it's about the monitoring plan, that's 4.1. and the calculation of the C-sink potential at factory gate, that's 4.2. So these chapters, they are structured in a way that in 4.1, you give all the data that you want to monitor in order to determine the emissions at the end that you may have during production. And the second subchapter, so 4.2, is about how to use these parameters that you monitored according to your monitoring plan in some formulas, and how shall these parameters that you monitored here be used to calculate the emission removals in the end, or at least the C-sink efficiency. And then chapter 5 is about the rest. As Julia said, we wanted to be very precise about all that's within the influence of the producer. So from the biochar to the final C-sink efficiency and to the final biochar. And then there is all the processing steps that are only covered very generically in here. So it's about the parameters that need to be monitored and the calculation, how it should be performed in theory, but there will be the annexes from the processors that give much more detail on this. So that's the general structure, and you have to focus mainly on chapters 1 to 4. Now we dive into where will you find the information, because even if it's only the red part, it seems quite a lot, but hopefully it isn't, because for example here it's the general description of the project. We gave you some description that may apply to most of the projects, where you only have to enter your feedstock and the amount of pyrolysis plants you're using, but you also have all the data available in the EBC portal that you know, where you're registered. And here you also have the brief description of your project, of your production. And that's actually what you can copy over here. Then it's about the project location. Where are your pyrolysis units situated? Where will it take place? Where will your biochar be sold to? And you can be vague, so you can write, I'll be selling it in whole Europe, and that's fine. So it's about to give some boundaries to the project, and that also includes the final usage. So you have to give some boundaries and you have to define it somehow, but you can be as general as it is as it still says something about your project. And also here you give the locations of the pyrolysis units that you are using till the moment. You can find them again in the tool in the EBC portal, where you have your pyrolysis units, and then you can copy the information from here. And you also know what type of plant it is and stuff like this. So you copy this here. You describe your project location. Then you go into more detail on your baseline scenario. So it's about what is the biomass that you are used for so far. Maybe you have a process that you modified in order to produce more biochar, and you just describe how was it before you started producing biochar for C-Sinks. Here it's about a little more in detail than here. Here it's really just 2 sentences up here, and here it's going into the details. So what was your biomass used before? How was the production looking before you started to produce in order to generate these things? Then it's about generic parts. That's biochar, carbon sinks. What is it? How is the project boundary? And then here it's about eligibility. That means, did you choose the right methodology? So did you determine correctly whether it's an artisan C-Sink project or it's an EBC C-Sink project, or maybe you're not even producing biochar, but you should have chosen the farming tool. So therefore here you just check, yes, I'm really producing EBC, WEBC certified biochar. This methodology is the right methodology, and I'm allowed to produce, and I'm also following the social criteria. So you have to check all of these and to provide evidence for it. Then there is the additionality part. That's probably something new for you. That's also something that is demanded by the market. It results out of the carbon reduction market, and you have to show that your C-Sinks are additional. So the climate service you are offering is really something that is additional to the C-Sinks that would be created anyways, which in this case means that there shouldn't be any binding regularities that force you to produce carbon sinks or carbon removals. So you need to have a short review of the legal situation in your country or in your operating area. And then there is something that shows that you really use the C-Sink enumeration to produce an additional carbon removal service. So here again, you show that you could not produce the C-Sinks without having the C-Sinks that you can sell and generate the money to actually do the climate service. So I think this shouldn't be a big problem for the projects, because all of you know that the C-Sinks are really, really relevant to actually be able to produce the biochar and to sell it together with its C-Sink potential. And here it's probably a little extra work, as you have to check your legal requirements. Then we are here at the ex-ante estimate for the impact. It's about the feedstock, the C-Sink potential, the established C-Sinks. And here you have it for the years. We do this documents now retroactive for most of your projects. So you just check on your certificates from the last years, how was my C-Sink potential, and you put it here. And then for the years that are still to come, you just give an estimate on the impact of the project. Now we are in the technology section. There we are looking deeper into your pyrolysis unit, and that's what I said before when I was a little mistaken. Here you find all the information about your pyrolysis unit. You bring it here, and also the company flowchart, for example, you provided in the technical pre-audit already, and the details on how you plan to use your energy and how you want to implement it technically, that's also something that you presented to us already in your technical pre-audit. So look for your old data and insert them here. Then we are at the feedstock section. There you all know the positive list of feedstocks. You can go here again, check for your feedstock, check for the feedstock ID, and insert them here. Describe again how was the feedstock used before, what is the feedstock, what happens to the feedstock before you started using it, and then there's this feedstock classes that are permitted under the EBCC Sync standard. So you select for the one that you are using. Then if we continue through the document, you see the distribution channels of the biochar. Here, the default is the geological C-Sync, so the application to soil. If you are planning to sell your biochar to, let's say, processes that included into building materials, then please add these to this list. And it means that you need to amend section 5 accordingly, because that's more project specific and you need to provide your details. And then we are looking for some data on your planned business development. So how, if you grow, what is your idea on feedstock usage and how much do you want to grow? And that's all the data for section 1 to 3. And now we are at the monitoring plan. So that's where you find here the lists at the beginning of each of the sub-chapters. You find the list how you need to declare your biochar. That's from the EBCC Sync standard, listed here and copied from the EBCC Sync standard and listed here. And then we have the monitoring plan where you monitor all the data that you need to calculate your C-Sync potential in the end. So it's, for example, the batch end and start date. So that's monitored per batch. And now in the last section, you give the documents or the reason of your the source of your data. So here, for example, it's the internal documentation. You can adopt this, and these data that you provide here in the source of data column, these need to be with you, so you can present them to CERES whenever they come to inspect your project and to validate and verify the project. So that's, you need to think about, where do I actually get these data from? These data in the parameters, they are demanded by the standard. The monitoring frequency, if you want to change it, you can change it, and you can see whether it passes the validation, because it's still in line with the requirements of the standard. And for the source of data, you insert your personal source of data, which you need to have present whenever CERES verifies and validates the project. And then there is also some ex-ante parameters, ex-ante definitions, for example, for the emission factors of diesel that are given. So this now is given for general data, then it's emissions from fossil fuels. Then we are coming to the pyrolysis section, and here you see you give always the source of your data. And at some point we are finished with the monitoring plan, and now all the data you can see that you monitored in the monitoring plan are now used in the calculations that are given here. So here it's always the complete calculation is given at the top, and then it goes into more detail. So here, for example, the emissions due to fertilizing per batch go into this formula at the end. So for the calculation part, that's done for you by the IT tools. So that's a requirement that it's openly visible, but most probably you don't need to change anything here. And then we are at the end. And here you can see again, now we are in the section 5, that's about the processes, where you just give roughly what they need to monitor, and this will be more specified in the document specific for the processes. So that's it for this one. Do we have any processes present here? I can shortly show it to you.
Yeah, perhaps a short introduction, to all
Yeah.
the annexes process.
Yeah, where is it? I opened it before. No, I did not. Okay. Annex to the, no, that's the wrong one. You can find them online here as well with the documents. And there you have the processes annex to PDD EBC. So for the processor, we decided that we have the cover page. This is this one, which doesn't contain very much information, but it shows you how should you label your product. So that's as per the requirements of the standard, that with the QR code on your biochar, you provide these information. So it's about the biochar content, the biochar C content, and the processing emissions, and the biochar production batch, the date of biochar production, and 2 things that are relevant for the global biochar C-Sync standard. So here at the top, that's data that will be the same for each batch, and here down here that may vary if you're purchasing your biochar from different producers. Then obviously the production batch of the biochar you use also changes, and that's the label that you need to put on each produced and processed unit. And then here you can see there's a document number referring to the next 2 tabs that will be publicly available. And here you describe what are you doing? What is the processing steps that are there? What are your used technologies? Does the biochar replace another product? If so, how was your business as usual without the biochar? So that's about your processing step only. And it just starts with the transport from some producers till your factory gate. And you don't need to care about the producers, and if you're not the last processor, you don't need to care about the application. It's just about what is your processing steps and where are the emission sources. Then you provide a flowchart of these processing steps, and then you state whether you are biochar processors certified under EBC, WBC, and the same for your product, for your suppliers. And then there is the monitoring plan again. We provided it with the default plan that you most probably will use. So you will have biochar, you may use water, there will be some additives, and then so you have some material input, and whenever there is something that wasn't listed here, you just add another row. So then we are at the processing. You will have some electricity usage, for example, and whenever we did not list any emission source that is relevant, you just add a line. Then there's transport. It's about binding, and then if you are the final processor, you also add the biochar transportation until its final site. You add the data for the certification period. That's most probably 1 year, and then it's calculated by itself per ton of biochar dry matter, because you give the amount of biochar you process within this time. You have to give some emission factors, and it calculates your total emissions. That is just the emissions related to the processing steps. And then here again, you also show the monitoring frequency and the source of your activity data and the emission factors. So here, these columns, L, M, N, have to be filled at the beginning. And so you have to think about what is the sources of the data I have, how can I prove the data, and you have to add the lines, the rows, if there is any emission sources that are not mentioned here. But you don't need to fill in the data for the validation step, and then for each monitoring and verification, you fill the actual data in here. Yeah, that's how this document works. Now I hand over to Julia again.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Okay, then I share again my screen and continue with the other documents. So we have then the monitoring report, which Patricia has also mentioned, and I quickly show it to you here. So it's it seems a little bit similar with as the project design document. So the first page also you have the name of the projects and the project summary. And then we have here the monitoring period and parameters. So we have created the text already for you, and your job will be that you add these annexes, which we have highlighted in yellow. So we have here the export from the DMRV tool. So these are all the monitoring parameters which we need for calculating the C-Sync. So we will provide them, or the CSI will provide this export for the C-Sync potential certificate, which were already issued. And in future, you can export it yourself from the biochar tool. Then the second annex is the quality certificate of the biochar, which you also know or have by hand already. And Annex 3 is the lab analysis, which we need, but this would not be publicly available on the registry. So these are the documents. So this is the export from the monitoring parameters, the certificates, and then the Eurofin lab analysis. Then from the PDD and the monitoring, we have here then the validation step. This is also something new. So it means that CSI will compare the PDD with the methodology and see if it meets the requirements. So in this validation report will be summarized the results. So the content is the objective and the scope of this methodology, the criteria, then also the reasonableness of assumptions, the materiality, the team which has validated the PDD, then the desk and document review, and then you will have a validation finding summary. Then in step 4 and 5, this is what happens on your side every day. So you implement your project and you operate and you monitor your data. So it means that you, the biomass is delivered to your production site. Then you make biochar with your pyrolysis plant. Then you have the products, syngas, pyrolysis oil, and biochar. And the biochar is the main product for us. And this biochar is processed further and comes into construction materials, for example. And on each step, you monitor your data so that you are still every day in line with the requirements. And then once a year, you get an on-site inspection by CSI, and they make the verification and see if you really work according to the guidelines. This is always in place today. So for those who had already an on-site inspection, you know that there is a finding report at the end of the inspection where the non-conformities are listed and the corrective measures. And in this verification process, CSI checks if the monitoring is in line with the PDD or your statements in the PDD that you have made. Then the inspector, after the inspection, creates this verification report. So here the content is a summary of this verification process, then also what happens during the desk or document review, and then also a summary of the findings. And then we have annexes for the producer and the processor, in which the findings are listed, the eligibility criteria and the compliances of the monitoring report, and also the project implementation. And then we have a statement of the traceability and the mass balance check, and the assessment of data and calculation of the C-sync. And then you have a final statement over the verification, which is also an annex of the verification report. And then the last step, we have the review of the verification report. You know this report already today. It's the certification decision today. We renamed it today, so it means that the second person of CSI, this is today Heike Renner and Gülsün Çelik, they review the verification report and issue then this document. And then when we come to the issuance of the C-sync certificate, then the first C-sync owner is responsible to collect all these documents, which we have presented today, and put them together to this set of project documentation, which will then be publicly available in the registry. And you see here again this modular system in which all the documents is one part of it, and when they are put together, then we have all the documents which we need for the project and the C-sync, which are already also required from ECOA. We are working on a solution that we can provide these documents via our IT tools, and we work together here also with the EBC C-sync brokers, which are accredited, so that in future all the documents come via the tools until the final point when you request the C-sync certification at the end. But so far, we will provide a link to an own cloud where the documents are saved, and then you can upload them as producer from this own cloud link. For us, it is important that we keep your high flexibility in your business, in which you can sell your biochar to whom you want, but without knowing what happens with the biochar at the end. And we want also to protect your supply chain. And these two criteria we meet with this modular system, and also with that we uncode the documents so that somebody who buys the C-sync at the end do not know the full supply chain of the C-sync. And then on the last page, you see here on the registry, we have these public files where all these documents which we have present to you are then listed. So it's the project design document, including the annexes, the validation report, monitoring report, finding report, verification report, and the review of verification report, and the C-sync potential certificate. The main persons perhaps are already in the process, so they had already an inspection for C-sync potential last year. So as we already said, we make this now retrospectively, so it means that we create, as CSI creates the verification report based on the inspection from last year. But we need the PDD from you, and CSI will make the validation afterwards. and then all these documents will be in the registry. And yeah, we ask you to create these documents as fast as possible so that in near future we will have these documents available in the registry and so meet the ICROA requirements and also have more transparency and more documents for the C-Things, which allows to sell better or have more trust in your C-Things by selling it. Great, so this was for my part. Then we are open for questions. So if you want to ask any questions, please raise your hand and ask them. Okay, we have, yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, Julia. So all the documents are public except the biochar analysis report.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And there was I'm not sure I quite understood the Excel spreadsheet you presented for calculating the greenhouse gas emissions.
For the processors, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the implementation and the monitoring plan.
Mm-hmm.
And how is this this final calculation used?
Patricia, do you want to answer?
Mm-hmm. So, as we said, for the producers, it's not known yet how much emissions the processors will have. And if you have the final C-Sync, it's also hard to demand from the farmer to provide all these documents and to make all these documents. So therefore, whenever you as a processor process for the biochar that you may purchase from different suppliers. So you have some biochar that you, let's say, mix into compost for a year, and your composition between biochar and compost doesn't change. So that's one, that's the period for what you are certified, and then you record all the data during that certification period, and you calculate based on the amount of biochar that you produced in this time, how much processing emissions per ton of biochar do you have. So that's in J33, and that's the processing emissions per ton of biochar that then go in the final calculation when the C-Sync value in the end is calculated. You know that there was some processing emissions that need to be subtracted or offset in order to have the final C-Sync value. So that's a different document. It's a standalone document. And then at the very end, if you want to claim your C-Sync, you combine the relevant portion from the producer's document and the relevant portion from the processor's document in order to determine the final global or the final biochar C-Sync value.
Okay, right. That makes sense. Thank you. And for the data sources for the emission factors, I assume we just use the national emission factor database. I assume that would be acceptable.
For example, yes, either
Okay.
this or you use this one which are in the EBCC Sync guidelines.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, any further? Yeah, Tana.
Hi, could you maybe speak a little bit more to the social criteria that is now part of the PDD? I think it was 1.5.
Yes. 1 second. I just check if I can open it. Also this is a self-declaration. So far, the document is provided by CSI. Here I have it. And these are general requirements which we have, or CSI have implemented, like for the employment, that you have wages and working hours defined, no overtime compensation and social benefits, then freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining are respected. And then we have the child labor requirement, these legal minimum wages and working hours. No discrimination and regular employment and no harsh or inhuman treatment. This is, in Europe, it's I would say covered all, but we also wanted to implement something because this is also a requirement of ICROA. And on the other, outside of Europe, I would say where perhaps the requirements are not so strict. It's a self-statement with a common field, and then the CSI will also check if this is comprehensible.
Great, thank you. Seeing the document helps contextualize it.
Julia, just another question. Are we expected to justify the declaration in the comment field with some kind of evidence?
If possible, yes. But I think we have to also start to work with this document and see what can be provided as an evidence. But if you have, I mean, this would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
When will this be implemented?
As fast as possible. Also it would be, we are here and we want to support you, and also the EBC CSync brokers has also offered to support you. It would be great if we could implement it in March, so that we have really the documents available in the registry. We know that the timeline is very short, and this is also why we really offer this support to you. So CSI is also ready to make the validation. So it would be great, if you could do it in near future.
Okay. And then these documents, they're uploaded onto the global CSync platform, and then I assume they're automatically synchronized to the particular sync?
Correct. So all the tracking systems which are used by the EBC CSync brokers are connected to the registry via the global biochar global CSync tool. And so these documents, will be then, you could upload them in your tracking system, and then they come to the registry then via the API
Okay.
point.
All right. Okay, sounds good.
Great. Okay. Any more questions? And I think there is another question. We will be audited in March, April. Will this practice be applicable compulsory by then? We are at the moment in the situation that we implement this new process. So we will ask you that you implement this in parallel, and then, as you know, we firstly need to have the certification for the biochar, and then afterwards the C-Syncs can create it and be registered in the registry. So this is a process, which you can implement now in parallel to your biochar production certification. And then, you will have it ready when you have the first C-Syncs and want to register them in our registry. Okay, we have still a few minutes left for questions. If you have some more questions, does not seem like this. So then, thank you very much for your participation. Still we are here to support you if you have any questions after this webinar. And we are happy to implement this new procedure with you. Thank you very much for your participation and your question. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Julia.
Bye.
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 Bye.